And so the next of the Limit Breaker quests have officially been announced. And with that, as always, we're here to discuss what characters are worth bringing, what's the best team to use for this upcoming quest in case you want to go further than stage 20. Now, lucky for us, this time around, it's definitely a lot more lenient, mainly given that slot number 1 isn't forcing you to bring a technique character like the last few months have done. And also, likewise, we're not forced to bring a power character like the last few months have done. But keep in mind, since this upcoming banner is featuring a new technique Limit Breaker character, for those that are waiting for like a broken power character, that is guaranteed to happen next month, because Power is the last character to get a new Limit Breaker character. So while we aren't forced to bring a power character this time around, we might have to bring a couple next month, in the month of May. With that said though, let's have a look at this month's requirements. In this case, slot number 1, we're going against Speed Attribute of Rankars. The rules include Technique damage ×2, Range damage ×2, and Killer Effect ×5. So ideally, you would like to bring a ranged technique Aranka killer, but since we're getting a 4x damage buff for just being a technique ranged character, that's honestly good enough and super easy to fulfill. Slot number 2, we're going against Mind Attribute Humans, and with that, we want to bring a heart character. They preferably want to be ranged, and they also want to have a human killer. And then the third flexible slot, we're going against Speed Quincy enemies, and there's going to be Paralysis Pulls. So quite easy to fulfill, I would like to think. But of course, the team caliber we want you to bring here is going to be 1000-Year Blood War Rangiku in slot number 1, 1000-Year Blood War Kiryu in slot number 2, and then 1000-Year Blood War Ichibei in slot number 3. So for those that are wondering, that means Ichibei, Senjumaru, and also Kiryu are set to return while this Limit Breaker quest is available, so basically within the next 2 weeks. With that said though, now let's have a look at some of the characters we can bring, because I'm also curious myself, what characters am I going to bring in this particular Limit Breaker quest? Because I don't know if I'll pull Rangiku, right? So first up, we want to bring a technique character that has a Ranki killer and is a range character. Let's see what characters do fulfill this, unfortunately. And that's in a way why I was kind of excited for Rangiku, is that there is 0 good technique Ranki killers that are SP characters. Now, of course, lucky for us, a character that does fit all requirements is 1000-Year Blood War Aizen. And Limit Breaker, I mean, if you're trying to go for like the fastest and like furthest you can go, Knight characters aren't that good. But since Aizen here is getting all the rewards, and he is the best Knight character in the game, he's definitely going to be a character I'll be bringing for slot number 1 if I don't manage to pull Rangiku. But he should be really good here, honestly, because he does have a high damage output, especially since he's providing your team with a boost and barrier, allowing them to do more damage, them be protected. He's immune to fire too, so he basically matches all the stuff here. And he's a range character too, with an increased chance to inflict weakening. And you know, weakening in Limit Breaker isn't nerfed, so you're going to do a lot of damage, especially when the gauge does actually activate. So Aizen is going to be, of course, one of the better characters to bring if, of course, you don't own Rangiku. Speaking of Rangiku, she's, of course, the character you want to bring here. Probably the best character to bring. She does have a very high damage output, especially when she is at full stamina. She's also providing your team with the 20% team heal, allowing them to stay at full stamina in the potential chance they take damage. But keep in mind, Rangiku's kit itself isn't really the greatest for Limit Breaker, weirdly enough, given that she's a Limit Breaker character. But she'll do fine. You know, she'll do fine. She's definitely good enough to get you to stage 19, which for most people is all you should really care about, getting the max rewards. So while she's not as good as she could have been, she's definitely still good enough to be used in the mode she wants to be used in, even though she doesn't have the most impressive strong attack here. But yeah, other than that, I wouldn't recommend bringing any of these other technique of Ranki killers. So let's have a look at our other options. So let's remove the range aspect, right? And look at our technique of Ranki killers. In this case, your doors do not open up any more than we already have. Like, I guess you could bring Grimjow. He'll work. He'll work for the most part. He'll definitely be slow on some of the, you know, more difficult stages like the poised enemies. Likewise, the Tsukishima, similar for him. But then again, I might actually try him, because he does have the Shockwave SA2, which can do a lot of damage if the enemies have poise, and the enemies have poise. So I might try him out. There's some potential with Tsukishima. Interested to see how that's going to play out. And I guess another character you could bring, wouldn't recommend it, but if you have to, Orihime, the Christmas version. What we can also do, though, remember, is just look at ranged technique characters. You still get a good buff from that. And in that case, you have some more better options. One being, for example, Renew Ichigo, another character designed for Limit Breaker for the most part. Really good with his high damage output, Frenzy +2, increased chance to fix status summons, 80% SP boost. And of course, most importantly, he does give your other technique characters recharge in between stages. If you can bring a full technique team, this character's going to be great to use in slot number 1. Don't have him? Maybe you can use Halibut. Maybe you can use Bambietta. I don't think this one will be too hard to fulfill. You definitely have a few other options. And a worst case scenario, if you really have to, just bring any technique character that you can bring. In this case, another good example would be Spirits Arthur with you, Untold Stories Tostro. Moving on, let's have a look at slot number 2. In this case, we want to bring a heart character. We want them to be ranged and we want them to have Human Killer. And in this case, let's see our options. Barely any, right? Barely any. I'm definitely not bringing Raitsu. I don't own this particular Okura. I guess since he does fit all requirements, you can definitely bring him. He actually has a good damage output for the most part. Can keep himself at full stamina and has, yeah, honestly, he's not going to be bad here. Definitely an underrated pick. If you're an Okura fan, you might be able to get a use out of him. But the idea, of course, is for you to bring the 1000-year Blood War Kiryu. Now, unfortunately with Kiryu, even though, like, they want you to bring her here, I don't know if I would recommend it. Like, of course, if you have her and you've worked on her, you might as well. But keep in mind, her SA1 is bad. It's very bad. Also, her SA2 is not a range attack. So that SA2, not only is it coming back longer, it's also doing the least amount of damage. Because it's not getting that 2x rain damage buff like the other attacks are. So, even though Kiryu, like, they kind of want you to bring her here, she's not the best option. She's not the best option. What I would actually recommend more so is, you know, disregard the ×2 heart damage buff and just look at a character with Human Killer that is a ranged character. And in that case, what you can do is likewise bring Ichigo in slot number 2, especially because slot number 1 wants you to bring a tech character, slot number 3 wants you to bring a tech character. Well, this slot, number 2, you can fit Ichigo in. He's not getting all the damage buffs, but you can fit him in there and then make your slot 1 and 3 character even better because then they guarantee to get their recharge in between stages, assuming you are using a technique character. So if I potentially manage to pull Rangiku in this upcoming banner, I'm definitely going to use this character in slot number 2 to make Rangiku even better. Other than him though, these are your other ranged human killers. Once more, not really the greatest. You have to definitely pick and choose who you want to have here. If anything, what you can do, worst case scenario, remove the human buff and just bring any ranged character. In that case, your options open up a tad bit more. Likewise, what you can also do, and this would probably be better, bring a ranged heart character that doesn't have Human Killer. And in that case, there's a bit more better options here. Most recent example being the new Valentine's Ruka. She's really good in Limit Breaker. She'll be a great character to use in slot number 2. Don't have her? Well, maybe you could bring her. Probably wouldn't want to, but she does have the built-in, like, recharge in between stages. I've never had a use of that with this character, but maybe you can get a use out of it now. I guess you could also bring the Halloween version of the world, and then worst case scenario, if you can't get any of those requirements, just bring a heart character, and in that case, a good or reliable Killgate would be good here. Maybe might be enough to get you to stage 19. And then lastly, for slot number 3, we want to bring a technique character, preferably with Quincy Killer, right? So let's go ahead and look at that. And of course, your options, not really the greatest, but you have 2 great characters here. First up, you can obviously bring Chojuro. While this quest isn't designed for him, like they clearly want you to bring the other character we're about to talk about, he's still going to be good here. He has Killer, he has a good damage output, constant high chance to inflict paralysis, keeping the enemies in place, will be definitely good enough to be used here. But of course, the most important character, you want to bring Ichibei, right? He is another Limit Breaker character designed to, you know, the faster he can kill, the better he is, because then he's keeping the gauge active, and that's when he gets the extra Frenzy +1 and extra 100% Berserker. His damage output is super high when the gauge is active, and he's a fast character to begin with. He's immune to the paralysis, and because slot number 3 is like the weakest stages, the enemies have significantly less HP compared to slot number 1 and 2 stages, he might be able to easily stack that gauge even faster, especially potentially if you pair him with Renewed Ichigo in slot number 2. It'll be an unrivaled combo, and that's exactly what I'm going to do in slot 2 and also 3. Remember though, slot number 3 is the flexible slot. You don't have to bring a technique character. You can bring any good character that you know is going to do good here. In this case, what we actually can do, potentially, you can potentially bring this character, Ichigo. Of course, he has the increased chance of extasment against Quincy's. You're going against Quincy's. His SA3 hits like an absolute nuke. If you've worked on him, good character to bring in slot number 3. As always, you can bring Yuha, even when he doesn't have Killer, even when he doesn't have attribute advantage. He still hits really hard, he recovers his strong attacks in between stages, and he also does provide your team with an extra sword bomb. Can never go wrong with Yuha in slot number 3. Likewise with Kyoge, right? The exact same thing as Yuha, the only difference that he doesn't give you the extra sword bomb. But that in of itself is still good enough to be used in any slot 3 in any given month. Yato, of course, given that she has Rampage, is also going to be good here. No killer, no attribute advantage, but that doesn't matter for the first Kenpachi. Essentially, as always, slot number 3 could just be any powerful character, especially those released in the past for Limit Breaker, and Sang do potentially the same, right? High damage output when the gauge is active, he'll easily be able to stack the gauge, might be a good enough character to use for slot number 3. With that said though, of course, the team Keller brought you to bring here is Rangiku in slot number 1, Kiro in slot number 2, and then Ichibei in slot number 3. But since you're encouraged to bring 2 tech characters in slot 1 and 3, I think the best team to bring this time around is Rangiku, Ichigo, and also Ichibei. Ichibei and Rangiku are the perfect characters for their particular slots, and while Ichigo won't be the greatest character for slot number 2, you know, he's technically not getting all the damage buffs, he's still going to clear fast, because he is getting a good amount of damage buffs, and most importantly, he's giving your entire team the built-in recharge, allowing them to clear their stages faster, where even though, you know, Ichigo himself might not clear his stages as fast as the other 2 characters, you're still overall maybe saving a lot more time. Especially given that Kiro herself isn't really the greatest character, even when she has all these extra damage buffs, I would definitely more so recommend using Ichigo in slot number 2 over someone like Kirio, who you might not even own, given that she's a limited character. Of course, if you don't own Rangiku, you can definitely still stick to this team. The only difference now is you take Rangiku out and maybe put Aizen in slot number 1. While he himself isn't an SP character, having his strong attacks ready and come back every time he's available does allow him to build up the gauge even faster, and also always keeps him protected with the SA2 boost and also barrier. So this is what my team is going to look like if I don't pull Rangiku. If I do, I'll use this particular team. And those are the teams that I would more so recommend. But as always, when it comes to these slots, bring always your best characters. The main goal is just to get to like stage 19, right? And that's where you get all the extra orbs and also transcended points. I think this time around, it's not too bad in terms of the requirements here. Again, you're not forced to bring a tech character in slot number 1. And funny enough, I think they did that because Rangiku's damage output, given her range collision, isn't that good when against the poised enemies. Because that's always like the worst thing about the being forced to bring a tech character, a speed character, heart, mind, etc., is that you're losing out on the extra 2 times damage output from being that attribute. I much prefer this because it makes the character better, and if you don't have the perfect character, you can always just experiment and just bring a ranged character with a rank killer that isn't a tech character. In that case, it opens up the doors for other characters to be used here. Either way, let me know your team composition in the console, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care and peace.